Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back from the coffee break. And so, just before I get started, I really want to thank all the organizers of Spark Me. This is actually the second time I've actually come back. I came to Montenegro last year and actually absolutely fell in love with this place. Beautiful place, wonderful people, nice people. And so that's actually, I very rarely go back to a place a second time if I don't like it. And so I look at sort of the incredible sort of energy from this conference, meeting a lot of all you wonderful people, gives me actually a lot of hope for actually where your country's going. But actually after the talk last year, I end up having, After the talk last year, I end up having a lot of things to think about. Here's this wonderful country that nobody actually knows about, and yet it's this jewel. But yet at the same time, it's going through a lot of economic sort of issues, and so this presentation actually came from a lot of things that came out of the conference last year. So let me talk about it. So I'm going to talk about the future of work. It's a venture capitalist view. And before I get started, let me just give you a little bit of context, right? I'm sorry, this is a total douchebag sort of meta slide, right? I'm presenting in front of a slide of me presenting, but I just realized that last night. I should have changed this. Yeah, it's conception. So just a bit about myself. I've been in Silicon Valley now for about 17 years. And I've been very fortunate. I've worked at startups. I've worked at a large company like Yahoo. So when I was at Yahoo, it was about 3,000 people. When I left Yahoo, it was about 15,000 people. Been doing angel investing. And I've been incredibly fortunate in my life to be able to travel all over the world. And part of my job is actually, I'm an investor now, so I invest in a lot of early stage startups. My job is actually to think about the future and invest in the future. And so a lot of what this presentation is about is less about, it's going to be a lot of trends, but it's actually trends in line with sort of work. Trends in line with sort of your career. And so hopefully, what I hope that you get out of this presentation are some ideas of how, and sort of how the world is changing and how you should be changing your career and thinking about your career as you move forward, all right? And so a couple things. I worked at big companies, and so this is an ugly slide, but the point I'm trying to make here is if you look at sort of what's happening in the world, S&P 500, it's 50 years ago, the life cycle of lifespan of a big company is 50, 60 years. And over time, as you've seen, it's actually less than 20 years now. So you've seen a lot of these big companies are actually declining faster and actually dying faster than you actually think. And the reason for that is because there's been an incredible amount of change out there, right? In Silicon Valley, we see every 4 to 5 years, there's a rise of a very major platform, things like Facebook or Google. If you look back, every 5 years, there's a brand new platform and player. And so I'll give you an example, where Snapchat didn't even exist. Don't even understand Snapchat because I'm not a millennial, right? But everybody's using Snapchat now. This didn't exist 5 years ago. If it did, it was very small. And so you're seeing these huge platforms are groundbreaking world platforms, and this is actually affecting a lot of the big companies. And why is that happening? Big companies are big, dumb, and slow, right? The nature of large organizations, when you're a small startup, you're very market focused. You pay attention to what's happening in your environment around you. As you get bigger and bigger, your attention turns inward. And I saw this at Yahoo. I loved Yahoo. It was an incredible experience. But we definitely got dumber as we got more people joining the company. And that's the nature of bureaucracy in large companies. And I'm talking about companies. I'm not talking about governments, which are even worse. I'm not even going to talk about that part. But this is actually why it happens, right? Big forces of change. Big organizations cannot adapt to this. And the other thing that's happening is the cost of startups over 10 years have declined more than 100 times. And so you're seeing it's just so much easier now to sort of do a startup than it ever has been. And so what's happening is you see big fish, right, being eaten by a lot of small fish. So or a better analogy I use is if you're an elephant, it's like being an elephant eaten by millions or billions of little ants. They take away little pieces of you and you can't adjust. And so you're seeing, this is part of the reason you're seeing these massive changes. And so a great quote by a guy named Cory Doctorow wrote this awesome book called The Makers. And I'm not going to read the whole quote for you, but the point that I'm trying to make is that these days, in my opinion, unlike what John Bradford, who's a dear friend of mine, says, the days of big corporations, most big corporations, in my opinion, are probably over. Okay? And this is actually what's leading to sort of these changes, right? 2 awesome books I'd strongly recommend. The End of Jobs, written by a good friend of mine, Taylor Pearson, who's just probably one of the youngest, best thinkers. If you want to find out more details about this, but he outlines a lot of things that are happening. And both these books, if you want to understand sort of the larger, bigger picture of changes over the last like 400 years and the new age that we're actually entering, it's actually very, very exciting. This is not something you should be scared about. This is something you should absolutely be embracing. And the point that he's trying to make in these books is that now in the past, entrepreneurial activity was not as as well rewarded by the world now. And I think with all the changes of technology, all the changes of like what's happening in society, we're moving in a world where like being an entrepreneur is actually not just required, but actually required for survival, in my opinion. And so let me explain. I'll talk a little bit about these. This is all sort of like a little bit dark, but it does get a little bit more positive afterwards. You think about what's happening in large companies and organizations in general, right? So I invest in the future. In theory, I'm supposed to invest in the future. And a lot of what software is doing is actually, I look at productivity, right? So if there's something where it takes 20 people to go work on this, I'm looking for companies and technologies, whether it's AI, whether it's software automation. How can we have just one person do that job working with like machines or technology, right? And that's actually what's happening. If you take a look at sort of the job destruction over the last like 20 years, a lot of it's been driven by, in my opinion, technology. The other thing that's been driven by, right, as companies are coming under massive, massive threat across the world, you have to cut costs. So one thing, invest in technology. The second thing, outsourcing. This person, I'm paying them $20 an hour. How can I find somebody in India or China to do this for $1 or $2 an hour, right? And these are two forces that are coming together that are squeezing these middle-class jobs. And so think about this, right? Think about a lot of these roles of what the roles and jobs where it used to be very, very prevalent roles across the globe that are now slowly being sort of eaten by software and eaten by these two things. And think about like cashiers, right? Cashiers, there's technology to do that now. Bankers, right? Used to go and get money, go to the bank, and now you have ATM machines. And if you think about the self-driving car, which I firmly believe, for self-driving car, self-driving truck, firmly believe that is going to be happening in the next like 5 years, in my opinion, just my opinion. And because of that, think about all the jobs that's changed. Taxi drivers. Thankfully, taxi drivers are scumbags, in my opinion. They cheat you in every place, in every city. Truckers, right? Feel bad for truckers. Critical thing for like our economy. All this stuff is going to be done by like self-driving trucks. And think about all the other jobs that's going to go down. If you're a lawyer, one of the biggest things that's actually happening across like the legal field is the shrinking of big law firms. So big everything is shrinking because of technology and outsourcing. And yes, this is actually a bad thing, in my opinion, right? It is partially a bad thing. And so this leads to a new mindset. If you want to survive and thrive in this brand new world, I'm going to quote my man Jay-Z, right? I'm not a businessman. I'm a business, man, right? Think about this. It's like now you have to take a lot more responsibility, have the mindset to basically build your own business. You have to think of yourself as a business, not as an employee. Anyone thinks like an employee, you're done. You will have no future in this new upcoming world that we're actually entering. And so all this stuff is like good and bad. Let's talk about the good stuff, right? So global platforms. I mentioned this like last talk that I had. This is a good thing, right? Now you're going to have like the only companies, in my opinion, the really big companies that are going to stick around: Alibaba, Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn, WeChat, like all these Tencent, all these companies that have massive reach. eBay, even eBay, right? PayPal, Android, Apple, these are all platform businesses, right? Think about what a big change this is. With Facebook as a platform, you can reach over 1.4 billion people. And so the reach that you can have as an individual, the reach that you can have actually as a company and business is unparalleled out there. And because of this, niches become very, very big, right? If I'm targeting males 18 to 22 living in cities who like, like this type of bottled water, I can probably come up with at least like 10,000, 20,000 people out there who might like this special type of bottled water. This is like a terrible example, but you get my point, right? Of just like in the old days of niches, when you want to build a niche business, you can only serve local folks, and they're great. I have 2 customers. Not that interesting. Now with these global platforms, you can literally reach millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions with these small little niches. And that's why you see businesses like Etsy, right? These maker movement stuff. And the other good thing about this is knowledge is everywhere, right? You have amazing platforms. Udemy is a portfolio company of ours. edX, Coursera. There's so much knowledge out there where if you want to learn anything about like online marketing, programming, whatever it is, you can actually take a class for this. This is incredibly powerful, right? There's no gatekeepers to knowledge anymore. Maker movement, lots of tools, right? I'm investing a lot of developer tools. I'm investing a lot of software. All the things that used to be really, really hard to use. Think about Ruby on Rails, right? How complicated programming was. Ruby on Rails has changed the game. It's simplified programming for a lot of people. And there's more and more of these tools. Things that used to be very, very difficult to do before are much easier now. Whether you're in hardware or software, it's so much easier now to go and make things because of these amazing tools that we have access to. And this actually led to this thing which I'm fascinated by. So anyone who follows me on Twitter, follows me on, that I'm connected with on Facebook, knows like I'm a big fan of sort of the digital nomad movement. I think we had somebody from Automatic speak this morning, right? Totally distributed workplace. And so I love this idea of like digital nomad and geo arbitrage, right? So now you can literally run your business from anywhere. And so I actually have friends who are doing like, making maybe $4,000 a month, right? And you're like, well, that sounds like a lot. It's actually not a lot. You actually can't survive in San Francisco, which is probably, I think, arguably the most expensive city in the U.S. But what my friends do is that they make, what they do is they have these online businesses, or they're like programmers, or they're online marketers, and they live in Thailand. And so they make like $4,000 or $5,000 a month. They have $1,000 that you can live like a king in Thailand, right, or queen. And then they save the rest of that money. And so you're seeing this movement of people running businesses from all over the world, have skill sets are in demand all over the world. They go to Upwork, or they do work on Craigslist and sort of like do these projects, and they earn money in euros and US dollars, but actually live in a very, very low cost area. And I think like I see that sort of more of the future. You're going to see more and more and more of these people. And the good news about this too is that there is a way forward. There's been books written about this, right? Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. That book has been around forever, but it's like these are guidebooks on like how you can actually thrive in this new world, how you can actually build these type of businesses or develop this type of mindset to thrive, which is, the resources that we all have sort of like access to has just been unparalleled. And so this is actually what gets me excited, right? For all of you. If I was in my 20s, I definitely think my career would have gone a completely different trajectory. I would not be doing what I'm doing right now. I'd be doing something different. Not to say I don't love what I do. I love being a VC. I love doing and investing. But I think I would not have gone down the corporate route. I probably would have gone down the entrepreneur digital nomad route, for sure. And so a couple rules that are key lessons if you want to get anything out of this talk, and hopefully this is somewhat helpful. Number one, learning is earning. All right? If you are not learning in your business, you're not learning in your job, you are actually not thriving, and you are not preparing yourself for the future, number one. Number two, this actually fits very, very well with Frank's presentation, which is like your network is your net worth. All right? Think about that. Your network is your net worth, because your network actually puts you in contact with future opportunities. And so this is actually something you need to treasure, probably more than money. Number three, niche to win. Right? Niche to win. Why is, hopefully that made sense of what I talked about with niches, but focus on like one thing. I talked with a very, very nice lawyer yesterday, and she was telling me about like, how she's like covering sort of like criminal law and stuff now, wants to sort of like go abroad and actually work in sort of like international law. And I think like, and there's a point to this where I really think like a lot of like focus on sort of like being really, really specific on sort of these needs that you actually sort of like on your customer needs. If you can find a specific set of customers, I bet you there's a lot of other customers potentially who will fit this niche, right? And these niches become very, very big. Side projects equals side hustles. I'm a big, big proponent. Everyone heard about Google's like 20% time, right? I actually think every person should have 20% time. I work on a lot of side projects. New companies I sort of like try to help out with. I'm trying to write a book. There's just a lot of things I'm trying to do. And these side projects are actually critical for you to actually get and connect sort of different areas for innovation. And so everybody should have side projects. And a lot of times, these side projects end up becoming side businesses or leads you down paths that you actually have no idea where they're going to go to. And the other thing is just, in line with number 1 and number 4, it just ultimately you have to think about like yourself as a business or your investor as an investor of like, how do you invest in yourself? How do you build a skill, sort of a portfolio of skills and incomes of multiple revenue sources? Because you never want to be completely reliant on just one income source or revenue stream, right? And because this makes you much more resilient, or as Nassim Taleb says, anti-fragile, right? And this is actually what is going to be the most critical, because if you believe everything that I said sort of through this presentation, all this change that's happening, it's not going to stop. It's actually going to get worse over time. And so for all the folks who are actually like, I just want to work on this job at this bank and hope that I stay at this job for the next 20, 30 years, those days are over, right? The traditional career path is over. And so you have to prepare yourself. It's exactly the same of like, it's almost like a turkey, right? And I was going to use this analogy. So this is a very relevant analogy coming from the US. So, everyone knows what a turkey is. Everyone knows Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving, you get together with your family and you eat a turkey together. And so think about this, right? In the beginning of the year, the farmer comes in and feeds the turkey, right? And so every day, turkeys think like, oh, look, I have an awesome life, right? Like, look at how amazing my life is. That life is amazing up until like November 1st, right? November 1st, what happens? Turkey gets its head cut off and basically gets cooked, right? This is exactly the same thing with most of you working at your jobs. And the difference is these farmers are basically the change that's actually going to be happening. And so don't be that turkey, all right? And so last of all is really be notable but not credible. Most of you, a lot of the people I met yesterday, just incredibly smart, really, really passionate, interesting people. And so like credibility is actually not a big issue for you. The thing that's actually important is actually being notable. How do you stand out versus everybody else, right? How do you differentiate versus all the other people who are doing what you are doing? That's actually more important, right? Most people who are doing their jobs are not incompetent. They're actually probably credible and can do their jobs fairly well. How are you the best at what you do? And if you do that, you will have a great future. And so last of all, I try to end with a very sort of like happy quote. Hopefully you found this sort of presentation to be somewhat inspiring, or at least thought-provoking. And so the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams, right? And I actually firmly believe this, of just ultimately work, and I'm very, very fortunate. I feel grateful and fortunate every single day. I get up every day and go, wow, I get to go to work, right? I get to have impact. I get to work on something, and I get paid very, very well to do something that I absolutely love. Unfortunately, for most of the world and most people across the globe, even in the US, they hate their jobs. They dread Monday mornings. They dread their Sunday nights. And that's actually a really sad way to sort of live the very, very short time that you actually have here on this earth. And so this is, ultimately a good career, and a good career leads to a good life. A good career leads to you being able to take care of your families. A good career leads to you being able to have wonderful adventures and live a happy and hopefully sort of like, in my opinion, impactful life here. And so hopefully you found this very, very helpful, and I hope you all are very, very successful in the future, and I look forward to meeting over the rest of this day, as well as maybe if I get invited back next year. I don't know, we'll see. But thank you again.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you. Do not be that turkey, probably the most important takeaway from this presentation. So I moderated the talk with John yesterday, and what he said is that corporates are actually heavily investing in startups. So it's not necessarily that they will stay as they are, they would try to sort of reinvent themselves. Now, you think they will go away. Can you just elaborate on that in a bit more detail?
Look, I'll give you an example. This comes from sort of personal experience, right? So when I was at Yahoo, we acquired a lot of companies. We invested in a lot of companies. And pretty much none of them went anywhere. So here's a challenge, right? If you look at corporates versus sort of startups, they just operate on very, very different tempos, right? Corporates take a long time, incredibly risk averse, versus sort of startups make decisions very, very quickly and actually are actually much more sort of market focused. And so when you see these two sort of sides come together, whether startups investing in, corporates investing in startups or corporates trying to work with startups, most of the time it actually doesn't really work out. Partly because you have this sort of mismatch of philosophies and tempo.
Right, they're not good at making decisions quickly. They need time. Okay. One of the underlying issues here that you haven't talked about, but it's kind of like surfaced, is educational system of today. So do you think that universities need to be disrupted? And if so, when and how that change will come about?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's happening already, right? Like, if you look at sort of what happens, whether it's universities or any industries, like, I invest in a lot of companies, my job is actually to look at a lot of different industries. What typically happens in every single industry is that you have, usually it's called the rule of three, right? You have like three really, really dominant players, then you have a whole bunch of niche players, and then everybody in between gets destroyed. And that's jobs, anything in life, actually. This is just something I've just observed. Same thing's actually going to happen in university, right? Harvard, Stanford, they're going to be fine. And then you're going to have these like niche sort of like, maybe they're like schools focusing on very specific areas, liberal arts schools, and then everybody else is just going to get squeezed. And so generally speaking, I'm actually very anti-university because, and I say this particularly with the US context, because the problem in the US now is that there's so many more universities, there's so many people spending a lot of money going into debt. And so I'll give you an example. The typical university student is coming out of school, and these numbers vary, but like they're spending $15,000 to $20,000 annually for university. So they're leaving with at least $50,000 in debt coming out of university before they even start their work, right? And so you're already in the middle of, bottom of the hole, and it doesn't guarantee you a job, right? The days of actually go to get a good education, get a job, and you're set. Those days are over, right? We're moving into sort of more of an entrepreneurial sort of age where those entrepreneurial skills, you might not have to start a company, but you have to be entrepreneurial minded. That's the only way you're going to survive in this new world.
Okay. Would it make sense to do accelerator program for universities?
I don't know. I
Never
different
thought about
skill set. I'm not sure that's. I mean, the way I think about it is my competition isn't necessarily other accelerator programs. My competition is MBA programs. I hate MBAs and I hate MBA programs. I think they're horrible. I think it's the biggest waste of time.
Was that applause?
It's just, look, if you want to work at a big company or iBank, then go do an MBA. But like I said, if you believe half of the stuff that I said earlier, like, you're not going to have a future working at a big company, right? Do it for 1 or 2 years. It's good learning, but it's soul-sucking, in my opinion. That's why I left, right? Why did I leave a very high-paying job to basically like go do this risky startup thing? Ultimately, it's about impact, right? And I think it's very, very hard to have impact at a large organization. Just my opinion.
Right, gotcha. So let's just do this. So Marvin just graduated to high school. What do you do next?
I would actually go. So I would do exactly what I do right now. Read everything I possibly can about sort of areas that interest me. Talk to and meet as many different people as I possibly can. And I would probably go down the digital nomad route. I'd probably move to Asia or something and actually start like an e-commerce business or do something. But that's probably what I would do.
Try to find your niche.
Yeah, and I would find my niche, and I would do one of the things that actually I wish I'd done when I was much younger is like doing things like Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, and just like learning a lot about yourself to basically understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like and what you don't like, to go and like figure out. It makes it easier to figure out that path of what roles are actually interesting for you, and then that's the thing. It's just so many people are unhappy at work, right?
Right.
And so it's just like, why would you go and work on something that makes you unhappy? Yes, you have to survive and make money, but just, there's so many opportunities out there, and there's so many options out there for you. And maybe I'm just sort of speaking because maybe I'm spoiled and been very, very lucky, and I do feel very, very lucky about that, of having sort of what I have. But just like, I just think it's such a brand new world, and there's so many amazing opportunities, and it's out there. You can actually get it if you actually take the time and energy and effort.
Okay, let's open the floor for the questions from the audience. Here's one right there. Gentleman in the green T-shirt. Is that green?
No.
No. Okay.
No problem.
My bad.
Hey, Martin. Thanks for the talk. It was great. We were speaking together. I have two quick questions. We were speaking last night. We were speaking actually about how do you find startups to invest in. So if you can kind of elaborate it a little bit more, so where do you find startups, and does it also maybe sometime happens that you approach a startup versus a startup approaching you? And the second question is about the Snapchat raising 1.8 billion, and I wanted to hear your opinion on that. And is it something that they really need? I mean, do these startups really need so much money, and or is it just like they are getting the money that are there, so they're just getting because it is there?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, so first question, where do I find startups? I very rarely approach startups. You know, I've been very fortunate to have been in the Valley now for a long time and have a good network. So very similar to what Tony said yesterday. A lot of it is basically from sort of like referrals, right? Investor friends of mine, startup friends of mine, who basically say, hey, here's an awesome founder, an interesting business. You should talk with them, because you need these filters. And so having a very, very wide range, the network, right? Like I feel like I have a decent network. Like I get a lot of referrals in because it helps me filter. Because if I sort of like, and I have to say, every once in a while I do actively go out and talk to companies, because there are some things sometimes where I do think about, like, I think the world is going here. I think like these are interesting spaces and industries, and I'm gonna go and like, I want to at least talk to companies in these areas. And so sometimes I do that, but it's very, very rare, all right? Second question in regards to Snapchat, I think it's sort of like both, right? So people are like, why are they raising like over $1 billion? And because the money's there, or do they actually need it and just because they can? I actually think, look, to really build a big company, so everything I said is just, it's been easier than ever to do a startup, to start a company. Whether you're VC funded or not, it's so much easier than it ever has been to do a company. It's really, really hard once you have some initial success to scale up a company. It's incredibly expensive, right? You have to hire a lot of people, you expanding in new countries. It actually requires a lot more things to do. So that's why you actually have to, to scale a company, it's incredibly expensive. And so if you can raise like 1.1 billion, I actually think it does justify it, right? Think about how many people in this room use Snapchat, right? Engagement levels are very, very high. They have not completely figured out their monetization. They will figure it out, right? Every business, if you have massive engagement and massive users and a large number of users with massive engagement, you're actually finding out how to make money off this is pretty straightforward. It's actually not as hard as actually getting engaged users. And so I actually think it justifies, like, I think that valuation is probably high, but the reality is that they probably do need this money as they're expanding globally.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Here. Is it here? No. One more question. Over there. The guy in the green.
I see a trend in Germany, for example, that a lot of very smart people fulfill their dreams by founding a company. Unfortunately, they found out that they are not Mark Zuckerberg. So they spend a lot of time fulfilling the dreams which not come true, unfortunately. And I see a lot of not smart people going to the big companies and doing a mess there. That's why the big companies are going down. So when do you think is this mixture going back? So that the smart people say, okay, I give it a try, but at one point I see it doesn't work out. I go back to the big company and I try to have an impact there.
So, like I said, I get that point of view, but on the other hand, it's just like, here's how I think about this, right? It's actually about taking multiple tries. Doing startups is really, 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 really hard. That's why I have incredible admiration for anybody who does it. But the reality is that the big difference in the value, look at the people who you look at are like, oh, look at how successful they are. There's no such thing as an overnight success, like what they call like one-hit wonders. The reality is that a lot of times people have been trying many times prior. You just didn't hear about it or know about it. And so there's a US saying, it's about time, swings at bat, right? You have to take multiple swings. It's like a portfolio, right? You build a portfolio. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, for every 100 companies that we invest in, we only make money from 5 out of the 100 companies. It is no different. Granted, I hope you're not starting like 100 companies, right? But the point I'm trying to make, maybe it's 10 companies or you're taking 10 shots. The reality is that those people, like, this world is changing, right? Those big companies. I look at companies, right? Like, HP's laid off a bunch of people. Intel just laid off 12,000 people, right? Like, you go down the list. IBM has been in rumors of laying off like tens of thousands of people. Like, all these big companies are shedding people. And so this is a question that I ask all of you if you get anything on this conversation is like, do you want to be in control of your life, or do you want your life being controlled by somebody else? And so do you want to live a proactive life, or do you want to live a reactive life? And I actually think like happiness is actually living a proactive life. How do you prepare yourself for these changes that are happening? And so if you want to live a reactive life, go join a big company, a big organization where you literally have very few things that under your own personal control. Good luck with that. The big difference, at least I have admiration for those people. Even if they failed, at least they tried, right? And you have, people go, that's risky. Not really. You actually can have a lot more control of where your company is actually going, right? You're much more diversified. You have multiple sort of like, in my opinion, revenue streams. Every single revenue stream is a customer, right? So you actually have a lot more control over your life by running your company. And I think a lot of people, the best entrepreneurs are not starting companies because they think they're going to make a lot of money. They start companies because they think they want to have an impact and they want to affect, like, what's the best way to become a billionaire? Help a billion people. Literally, like serve a billion people, right? What's the best way to become a millionaire? Serve a million customers properly. And it's very simple, not that easy. I know that for a fact. It's incredibly hard, but at least you have control. And that's probably, in my opinion, probably one of the biggest factors of your personal happiness. And so hopefully that makes sense.
Okay. And the final question for you, Marvin, what lights your spark?
Meeting super interesting people.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big part. And learning. I love learning, right? I invest a lot in myself. I go to a lot of conferences, not just speaking, but personally learning. I read a lot, as people know. I love reading almost as much, maybe even slightly more than my family.
There you go.
Yeah, and so that's what excites me, right? And actually having an impact, hopefully trying to help people. Sometimes I am seen as a jerk, but it's not because I honestly want to be a jerk. It's because I see people do stupid things, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Because I think that they can do better.
Right. Bring tissues if you want to talk to Marvin about your startup. Okay. That's it, ladies and gentlemen.
I wish you all the best of luck in your futures, in your careers.